Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I Want to Teach English. I'm your host, Jose Torres. Today, I'm being joined by Dr. Olga Diaz, who has spent more than 3 decades in education, serving in various different positions, most notably as department chair and education teacher. And she's also the senior director of assessment and accreditation at Toro University and the current past president of the New York State TESOL organization. So the TESOL affiliate is a big plus. That's something that we're always trying to strive for in this program, to get as many people from our community to get on here and talk to us about all the things going on in ESL. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Olga Diaz. Dr. Diaz, welcome to I Want to Teach English.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor and a privilege.
Just, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing? Talk to us about your work.
Well, I'm an avid educator. Needless to say, when you said 30 years, it kind of resonated on, wow, it's been that long. But it's still a passion of mine, education, and from different lenses. I've been privileged to have held various roles throughout my career as a P12 bilingual special ed teacher, then in higher education as a department chair. I worked for New York State Department of Education for a period of time, staying connected in the field through the multiple organizations like New York State TESOL. I'm the immediate past president, but more and more devoting my time in researching and finding out what are the needs of the field, and from a global perspective. So bringing my research across international waters and just seeing what's happening there and bringing back some of that information and just staying current in the field is been what I've been doing. And I tend to be an eclectic person, not just stay in one mode and one way of experience, but any opportunity that I can get to expand my own professional growth and my own professional knowledge and be able to tap into other areas or other areas of the world of education is pretty much where I am. And so right now, most recently, I took on a position at Toro as the Senior Director of Assessment and Accreditation. So now my focus has been more on assessment and accreditation of higher ed and teacher preparation program. Most recently, I was appointed as a board of directors for one of the leading accreditations of teacher preparation program, which is AQUEP. And so doing this work and seeing what other institutions of higher education and teacher preparation programs are doing, what is the innovations, what are some of their challenges and struggles still. So I try to keep me in the perspective of the P20 arena.
That's great. That's amazing. You got a lot going on, Dr. Diaz. a lot going on. I respect that incredibly. So talk to us a little bit, because you began your career as a bilingual special education teacher, right? That's in itself is got a lot, to unpack. So before you went into higher education leadership, so how did those early classroom experiences shape your views on effective instruction of multilingual learners? Because I imagine it looks very different when you go into higher ed.
Yes, it does. Those early years as a P12 bilingual special ed teacher were my forming years, was really where I stepped out of college at the classroom from theory and went into the practice and really understood what the challenges were, what was the gratification, where I fit and where I can contribute, and where was I learning and expanding my own pedagogy. And so those early years were very key to how it drives the rest of my profession. But getting to know the student on a one-on-one basis, right? And really understanding their needs and what they brought into the classroom. And so how their experiences and their cultures and their multilingual languages just kind of gave the lesson plan that I planned for that day, gave it life, right? So I naively came in with a plan, and this is what I want to teach my students, and this is what I believe they should learn at this point of the semester or the term. But what happened then was I would face reality. I would face what they would bring in and how they saw that lesson plan that I had prepared and planned. And 9 out of 10 times, it would take on a total different role in the classroom because of their contribution, because of how they saw things, because of how they saw that objective, because of the way they interpreted the learning, and they used the manipulatives that I brought into to the session, in a way that I had not thought previously. And so that was a give and take opportunity each and every time that I would go into my classroom. It was a give and take opportunity. So those early years really gave me the foundation for pedagogy, gave me insight of what were some of the challenges and struggles that are still there. And that's what kind of gave me the motivation to kind of step out of the P12 classroom and say, what are the other arenas that I can engage in or be a part of that can help bring back some relief in some ways, or bring back some solution to the struggles of my P12 students.
Now, in higher ed, I mean, are you able to identify those in the higher education that those students who were special education and in their primary years and that sort of thing? I mean, are you able to spot that? I'm curious.
Oh, sure. I mean, in our graduate programs, we have both pre-service candidates and in-service candidates. We have current teachers in P12 that are coming for their master's, or going for additional teaching certificates to enhance their careers. And it's through those opportunities, through those doors, that I'm able to connect back into those classrooms and kind of have dialogues in our classroom sessions about what are your struggles in your classrooms? What are you seeing? What are some of the challenges that might be very specific to these time, to the needs of, because again, education is ever evolving. Communities are always evolving. So the same communities are not the same 20, 30 years later. And so with those changes brings new challenges, right? So I get to hear it from the teachers themselves of what's happening and how can we partner to bring some solutions to those issues.
You know, it's very interesting because I think a lot of times people get the wrong idea when somebody is labeled a special education, because they don't realize that there's also like the 504 plan where it's like a behavior issue. It's not necessarily like a cognitive issue. I think people have the stigma that anything labeled special education equals cognitive, some kind of cognitive issue, but that's not always the case, right, Dr. Diaz?
That is not the case at all. Special education is a wide range of unique and special labels. I don't like to use the word labels, but and we forget that at the higher end of that broad spectrum, you have gifted and talented. The gifted and talented community is part of the special education program, and quite often neglected because, oh no, that's not what we think about when we think about special education. We think about autism, we think about ADHD, we think about all the different more severe cases of disabilities that exist within the service of special education. But even within those levels or the different diagnoses, you can see differentiated levels there, diverse levels within the levels, if you will.
That's true. That is so true. And I'm hoping that people will get better educated on that, so that they don't, when somebody had special education, like that's automatically, the short bus or whatever. That's not necessarily the case, obviously, as you pointed out. Now let's shift gears a little bit, because I'm going to skip down here and talk a little bit about the teacher shortages. And that seems to be an ongoing conversation, as you can imagine, right? Especially, like, here's the thing, like with bilingual education, for example, or even special education programs nationwide, there are teacher shortages all over the place, right? So from your perspective, what's driving these shortages, and what can schools and universities do differently to counter it?
Well, there's a lot of different factors that we can spend endless hours, which we don't have at the present time, to talk about what's driving the shortage. But I can name you a few. A few of them that I hear from the field. And I have a very privileged career where I've been able to sit at tables in the Department of Education, with superintendents at the local levels, in higher ed. And I hear it again and again and again. And basically, it's as a result of burnout, right?
Oh,
Teachers that go in excited and then they are overwhelmed with being overloaded, right? And they get burned out and they leave. Lack of professional recognition,
mhm.
right? That's
It's a
something
big one.
that it's a big one, especially during the current terms where education is not even being deemed as a profession or threatened to be not deemed as a profession anymore.
It's a very sad
So,
truth.
it's the validation of what we do and the
Mhm.
respect of what we do that sometimes we're like, I don't want to go into education. You speak to undergrad students and you ask them, would you major in education? And they look at me and say, are you crazy?
Yeah, I was just thinking the
That's not
same
a
thing.
profession. I can't raise a family on that salary. And
Yeah.
so being properly compensated is another factor that people are leaving the field. But more importantly, is about resources and other challenges can be sometimes um, the policies that are in place, the teachers' unions, and the contracts that they have. I most recently was speaking at a table with multiple school superintendents from the Mid Hudson, New York area. And they were telling me we have a lot of shortage area, and special ed continues to be a shortage area. At ENL continues to be a shortage area. Bilingual, special ed, all the classics. And I said, why do you think is this? And one of the things that we came to the conclusion is that when a teacher becomes tenure, right, especially in New York State, I can talk about, teachers being required to have multiple degrees. You have to be initially certified in the gen ed, childhood or early childhood, adolescence, and then add the special ed or the bilingual extension to that. And so if a teacher is tenured in the gen ed classroom first, right, and now that school has a vacancy as a bilingual classroom or even an ENL classroom, special ed, even though that teacher may have those additional certificates that will allow them to teach in those roles, they can't bring their tenure with them. So
Mm.
asking a teacher to leave your tenure as a gen ed third grade teacher to become a bilingual teacher, they're not going to do it. So it's about talking with the right people and negotiating these issues to bring forth. The people are there. The teachers are there with multiple certificates. For instance, in New York City, it's the hub of multilingualism. Every
Yeah.
single person on the subway speaks a language other than English. So the idea that you can find bilingual teachers in New York City is mind blowing. I
Yeah.
said the people are there. What's hindering them from entering those classrooms are some of these factors, are the lack of resources, lack of opportunities, the very systems that hold things back from fluidity, right? And transitioning and transitions. So those are some of the many factors. And this is again nationwide. Again, I just came back from Spain from an international conference and speaking with colleagues there, they have similar issues that we do here in America. So it's a global issue.
It certainly is. And I want to see if we can dig a little deeper into one of those aspects, because this is something that's been a point of interest for me and some of my independent personal research, and it has to do with the pay scale. I'm wondering if that alone, Dr. Diaz, I'm wondering if that alone, if it's just that one factor would tip the scale in favor of having more teachers, more people look into the profession, especially for men. I think that's a big question mark. Is it because I know that in my state where I live in Maryland, there's been a real initiative, like there's been this real push to try to attract more men into the profession. Do you think money would attract more men into the profession, or anyone for that matter?
Well, money's always a good incentive, right?
It
And this
certainly
is
is.
definitely has been a field that has been really not a priority when it comes to appropriately
Mhm.
compensating teachers again, and it has to do with the cultural changing the mindset of the culture that we're not babysitters, we're
Mhm.
educators, right? I always
Yeah.
say in any open house, always say, come to education, be an educator. Well, why? I said, well, because you can't be a good doctor without a great educator. You can't be an astronaut without having had a great educator. So an educator was the founder of the whole series of careers that you can name. And so just having that validation that education is a reputable career, right? Just raising that standard is the first thing. And then compensating accordingly, right? There has been numerous conversations around the table about, as an attempt for teacher retention, to let's pay special education teachers a little more, right? Because they do so much more. They have to engage in IEP. They have to engage in a different, so much more. But then what is that to say about the general ed teacher, right? They do just as much and are just as devoted, right? And so how do you compensate one field or one certification over another is a challenge. But the reality is that as a whole, no matter independently from what your certification is, we are underserved and supported, right? So it's not always about the money, but it's also about the support that you receive in the schools. A lot of the teachers that are burned out, they feel disrespected, unappreciated, taken advantage. And so it's those little things that sometimes go a long way, right? So sometimes you will speak to teachers and say, it's not about the money. There's not enough money in the world that will keep me in this district or in this school because of the culture, because of the negative and culture that exists. So to answer your question, Jose, I think it's all in perspective. It's all about what works for some individuals, compensation accordingly, right? But also the respect in the field and support.
Absolutely. I think you hit a lot of great points there. I know that when I've talked to teachers that are much younger than me, one of the things I always tell them is it's really a navigation. Really, it's you have to navigate through a lot of these things. I think teachers that are coming up tend to take things a lot more personally, and it's one of the things I've had conversations with others on this show, talking about removing the personal feelings and the professional feelings. So like when you walk into the classroom and you are a professional and you try to put the personal feelings, leave it at the door so that you can do your job without feeling like, a certain way. Cause sometimes it's just natural. Things happen. And I think this is something that you can talk to a little bit more in depth. And I want to ask you this because you spent a lot of years preparing future teachers, right? So like what separates the teacher candidates who thrive in today's classrooms from those who struggle? Because we know that there are people that struggle. And certainly you have, I'm imagining that you've worked with quite a few that are up and coming, you're getting preparing them for the classroom. What do you tell them as they're entering this profession? Like, how do you prepare them for that?
A quick answer can be their disposition, right? You have to have the right disposition. As mentors of teachers and pre-service and in-service teachers, educators, we tell them you have to have the right disposition, right? But how does that translate into, right, in the actual behavior? I find that the teachers that thrive, that are successful, are those that they understand that we are lifelong learners, that there's room for learning every day. When we get out of our beds and we get ready to go into that classroom, it's an opportunity for us to learn from our students, learn from our peers, our colleagues, as we also give of what we know and what we've mastered, right? Opportunity to learn, have that flexibility and adaptability, not be so rigid. And like I said before, you come in with that perfect lesson plan that you worked on the whole night or the whole weekend, right? And you're just so excited about it. And then you get to the classroom and the reality is that the students are just not ready for that today, right? Adaptability, it's okay. It's not a reflection on you. It's the momentum. It's what's the need. What are they thinking, and what do they need to know about at that moment that wasn't your perfect lesson? The flexibility, being a lifelong learner, being able to accept positive feedback and constructive feedback, not be intimidated by their superiors or the supervisors or principals at AP coming into their classroom. See them as an asset. See them as a colleague, a collaborator, rather than a supervisor that's coming to, have that positive, that mental ability to receive from a positive perspective, because it's only intended for you to grow. And those are the teachers that I really see thriving, that they seek mentorship, that they seek opportunity, that they are always looking to reinvent themselves, even after the worst year, right? There's always that academic year that tears us down, that it just really, it tears
Oh
you
yeah,
apart, and
we've
you
been there.
question did I make a right choice, right? And
Yeah.
then luckily you have the summer to recruit, regain your energy and your strength and get back at it like once again, right? So those are the teachers that really strive, those that seek for those supports, that collaborate, that are not afraid to receive feedback, that understand what the needs of the students are, versus those that don't, versus those that believe that teaching is a set of strategies and techniques. It's are geared around a curriculum, and that's it. We don't move away from that. We teach behind closed doors, and this is my world, and I'm the teacher, and you're gonna, those don't do very well after a while.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think at some point, people just have to face the reality that the schoolhouse is really a microcosm of the world, and you're going to have great days and you're going to have bad days. You're going to meet nice people, you're going to meet mean people. That's just life. I mean, you're just going to. I don't know. I've tried my best to mentor as many as I can. Those that even want that, it gets busy throughout the day. But thank you for that. That was very thoughtful way to look at it. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, because having the face-to-face in-person classrooms are one thing, but dealing with online is a completely different thing. And I know that your doctoral research focused a lot on online learning, correct?
Yes.
So like, especially with like English language learners, you know, they long before any of this came about, this was always an issue. I'm trying to reach multilingual learners, albeit through some kind of online or an app. So looking back, what did your research reveal in terms of like the educators, and what do they still need to understand when trying to do this kind of work online on a virtual space?
Yeah, so it was, I would say, the time that I was doing this research for my dissertation, 15 years ago, it was at a pivotal time where there was a paradigm shift, and we were exploring more with online learning. And one of the things that I did my research on was on undergrad and international students taking online courses, and what was their perceptions, and how did they gain language acquisition, English language acquisition, by taking an online course. And one of the things that came out from that study was the importance, to ensure, as the instructor at the instructor level, to ensure that the course syllabus, the instructions, was as explicit as possible with basic language, understanding that they had English language learners in their course. One of the things was that many of the faculty didn't know. You get assigned a course, you have a class roster, and there's no little star next to it saying, "Hey, this is an English language learner student." We just assume that because they are at the graduate, they're in higher ed in colleges, that they are masters and proficient of English. And
Yes.
so we would treat them all the same way. Here's the course syllabus, download it, read it, process it, and understand. Here are all, and remember, in an online platform, everything was mostly written. It was written language. You kind of went and looked at the module for the week. You saw the resources that the professor assigned, and everything is in written language, right? And so not knowing that there were students that were English learners in your course was the first downfall, right? Because now the perception is, this is a graduate level, this is an undergraduate course, and in college, everyone should be at the same level. And they were not. One of the things that some of the students that participated in the study revealed was, I was afraid to ask for clarification of an assignment because I didn't want to seem dumb. Or I asked the first time and the professor just kind of sent me right back to the resource material and reread this. It's in the writing. It's in what I uploaded, right? And they shied away from asking. So it wasn't about how many times they read it. It was about comprehension. It was about perception. It was about lack of prior knowledge to really understand what the commands were. So gaining sensitivity and culturally responsiveness kind of is what that study opened up, and saying to my colleagues at that time, listen, we have to be culturally sensitive. Don't assume that because you understood the instructions that the students will understand the instructions.
Right.
Even if they're an English language learner or not. The fact that it's not in person, the fact that you don't have the physical linguistic cues to cue them in, everything is just on a canvas and just in writing. And so this is what led to let's upload some videos, some recordings. Let's upload some instructions so that they can see the professor, they can see those linguistic cues to support. Let's think about systematically a way to identify English language learners, international students, right? They should have some kind of coding in my roster that will flag me and say, hey, I need to provide additional resource. I need to be able to provide different modalities of engagement, right, through the discussion board platform. So all those things at the higher ed level came out as a result of that study. But even for the P12 students, right, one of the big things is let's buy some English language audios or technology resources, which is great. But then the teachers would put the students on their laptop for 45 minutes into, here's learn English, dual language with me. And there was no follow-up, there was no engagement, there was no intentionality to it. So the kids sat before the computer for 45 minutes, went through the different prompts, right? Answered or placed the cards with the words or did the matching, whatever the task was. And that was it. So it wasn't really intentional and authentic English learning experiences. So going back and saying technology is as good as it's used, right? And how it's intended to be used. And so having that understanding as an educator, that it is a tool that can enhance, but the instruction has to be intentional and meaningful.
Since 2016, the textbook I Want to Learn English has been used to help English learners all across the United States and other countries.
I Want to Learn English is a textbook specifically designed for adult and adolescent English language learners at the beginner level. The main focus centers on the fundamentals based in phonics.
Students improve their English language skills, and they raise their proficiency scores in nearly all major metric measuring platforms, with endorsements from ESL instructors around the world, a proven and effective track record, an achievement grant from the Maryland TESOL organization, and countless satisfied students. I Want to Learn English is the perfect textbook for high schools. English learning centers, refugee centers, adult ESL programs, and even middle schools with newcomer English learners. And now, in 2024, the second edition has taken the Level 1 English learning experience to a whole new level, with improvements to the audio components and the addition of videos corresponding with various activities throughout the book. ESL teachers and their Level 1 students will absolutely love using this book. It requires very little technology, yet simultaneously utilizes the most powerful technologies in the world, including social media.
Instructors using this methodology in the textbook find it easy to implement.
Get your copy of I Want to Learn English, the second edition, on Amazon or order directly from the JV Micah Publishing Company.
So if you have like different dynamics, you're definitely going to have different results, is what I'm gathering from what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a different feel. And and that's true. And I think a lot of teachers are guilty of this, whether they want to admit it or not. That, when it comes to personal learning time or something of that, whatever they want to call it, where it's basically a child on a computer, and there's a certain span of time in which they're doing like some kind of app or some kind of program, and it's kind of hands off a lot of times. You're right; they don't always follow up, and they should. But I think maybe you're right, 100%. I think that's a structure. That's a system structure thing, though, because if it isn't implicitly stated, and when they're talking about the schedule of the school day and what teachers are responsible for, because a lot of times it's scripted, And if it's not in the script, I mean, how much of it fall on the teachers? I say, how much of it does it fall on the teachers? I think some of it does, but systemically, I mean, a lot of it falls at the doorstep of the higher ups, because they have to be a little bit more explicit about how it's supposed to roll out. Don't you
Exactly.
think?
Absolutely.
Anyway, we could talk about that story. But since we're talking about virtual space, you presented internationally about digital storytelling, which is something of great interest to me, is personally, and talked about language learning and teacher preparation. So how can storytelling, in the digital space or in person, how can storytelling help multilingual learners develop language confidence and identity, Dr. Diaz?
Well, precisely as a result of that in-depth study that I did with technology and English language learners, it led me to what are some other modalities that students can continue to learn English and content, and that led me to digital storytelling. And so what it does is it provided my students with an opportunity to share their voice, share their culture, share their language from their experiences and their perspective. And on the flip side, while they were constructing these digital storytelling, they had to think about planning the visuals. What pictures of my life do I want to show? What visuals do I want to share? They had to plan the narrative. How am I going to say my story? What aspects of my story do I want to share? So that incorporated writing and thinking, right? The receptive and language as well. It developed their vocabulary, because I'm looking for those adjectives and word descriptions that will give that visual a voice and a narrative. And it validated who they were, right? In a classroom that there's so much diversity and different perspective. And so I found that was a good, a different modality to give them a platform that they can share their voice, that they can share who they are, celebrate who they are, but also at the same time demonstrate their language acquisition as they developed the project.
It's interesting you frame it that way, and I think I've seen this over the years as a teacher, just as you described. And a lot of times that inner voice comes out in many different forms and in many different ways. The story that they want to tell. However,
it humanized the student. It allowed for an opportunity. It's something that remains and stays once it's created. And it humanized the student. I think that and that's the advocacy part of me, of saying, yeah, we did this as a project. It served its purpose. It met the targets, the learning targets of the student. But now is an artifact. Now is an artifact that can be shared, that can humanize the population of English language learners and say, this is who I am. This is who we are as a community, especially in New York City, in New York State, where we're so diverse.
Yeah, no doubt. No, and let me tell you, this is the right way to do it. I just wanted to just point out, though, in my experience, I want to hear what you have to say about those students that don't want to talk about themselves, that don't want to, they don't want to share anything. And I've had that happen a few times. So in your expertise, like, how do we do that? Like, I always tell them, like, you know what, maybe not talk about your inner voice. Maybe you want to tell a story about somebody that in your family or somebody else, to kind of get the wheel rolling, as they say. I mean, that's how I remedy. What do you suggest?
You're right, Jose. Absolutely. In a very diverse arena, as a classroom, right, in New York City, you're going to find representatives of communities that are marginalized, right? Mm-hmm. Who's the current target, right? We can say in New York City, in the 50s and 60s, it was the Puerto Ricanos, it was the Puerto Ricans, right? That has transitioned, right? Then it became the Mexican that were marginalized. And then it became, most recently, after 9/11, it was our Arab communities that were being marginalized. And so depending on our political and social experiences, a different subgroup gets marginalized. And now you have those representatives in your classroom that might show resistance, that might be afraid, right, to open themselves up to the world because of what they fear, right? How do we get them to engage? We respect where they are through conversation and allowing to differentiate. Okay, this is the class project, but if you don't want to fully do a full narrative, a full life experience on it, maybe just do a picture of one thing that you're happy about, one thing that makes you excited. You know, it could be a birthday, it could be anything that hits home to them, that they would be safe in sharing, and then creating a culture in your classroom that's respectful, right? That is supportive, to say to that student who's afraid to come out and say, this is where I'm from, to say, we're going to support you. Have a buddy to read it out for you. Maybe you're not comfortable orally, or afraid to share because of where you come from and how you think the world is viewing your country, right? And have a buddy and say, I'll read it for you. I'll share it, so creating safe places where they can take those subtle or simple little risks as you build their confidence in acceptance and assimilating into their new culture, into their new surroundings, and feeling a sense of belonging is what will give that teacher success in allowing those students to be successful.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, it sparked a memory where I was working with a group of Nepali students. And I remember there was this girl who, she didn't want to tell her story. But so I told her, well, why don't you tell me what you want to be later on in life, right? And so she wrote about being a doctor. And I asked her, why do you want to be a doctor? And she said, because she wanted to, she had sick grandparents and she had people back home in Nepal that she was talking about her elders, and she wanted to be able to provide, medical for her elders. And I thought that was beautiful. And I said, this is great, man. She didn't want to go back in time. She wanted to look forward. And I encourage them to do that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned Puerto Rico. Are you Boricua?
Absolutely. Nuyorican.
Nuyorican?
Nuyorican.
I just had to ask. I love Puerto Rico. It's one of my favorite places.
Born and raised in New York City of Puerto Rican descent. Very proud to be and represent my culture.
I love Puerto Rico. I've been there so many times. I can tell you, man. I love that place. All right. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. So many educators hear terms like differentiation. This is one of those loose terms that people throw around, right? But implementation of that, especially those who aren't like taught that in college, or even in gen ed, sometimes we don't. And I say we because I started as a regular English language arts teacher and moved over to ESL, but that isn't always in the handbook. It's kind of difficult if you don't know how to do that. So what does effective differentiation look like for multilingual learners in today's classroom, which could, it's a different landscape now.
It's definitely a buzzword, right? And it has to be modeled. What does it actually look like, right? So earlier on, we in bilingual and special ed, we talked about accommodation and modification of instruction, right? Those were the buzzwords of those times, right? The most recent one is differentiation. But I think that if we don't understand the terminology of what it is by definition first, and then model, how does that look like in the actual classroom, in the decision making of your lesson plan, right? And so differentiation is more than just giving additional worksheets or grouping students, right? Everything is about intentionality. What's the intention? But more specifically, intentionality based on knowing the student need. What is the student academic and linguistic level? What are their needs? And that will prescribe what differentiation is needed with intentionality. That's key, right? So it's not about, okay, and I see this time and time again in my role, as a teacher, educator, where candidates will give me their lesson plan and they'll describe what they allege is differentiation, right? And when I read the description, or I say to them, okay, show me or tell me what, it's really, they're doing either a modification to the instruction, They're doing an accommodation, but it's not differentiation. And so modeling is very important. For instance, and how I do that intentionally is through my courses and giving them a hands-on experience on this is what this looks like, right? And I do it from the lens of assessment. I'll give you a perfect example, an activity that I do. From the lens of assessment and evaluation. In that unit in my course, in discussing the importance of assessing, ongoing assessment and evaluation, I take it from the basic, simplest way, just understanding the term difference between evaluation and assessment. Assessment is the process of gathering that data, right? And the evaluation is where you sit with all that data and you make an evaluation and a decision, whether for promotion or for passing or for services, whatever it is. And so how I illustrate differentiation through that lens is in a classroom dynamic where I put the students in groups and I give them a task, right? And that in the task shows the differentiation based on a simulated need, right? So I start from group one will have the task that says, is there a difference between assessment and evaluation? That's at the most basic and simplest term under the assumption that that group of students know nothing about assessment and evaluation or very limited knowledge. It's a yes or no response.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that would be for my level 1 students. And I do this with in-service teachers to show them how to differentiate. The next group will have, under the same theme, assessment and evaluation, to draw a diagram or a T-chart to illustrate the difference between assessment and evaluation. Now that's under the assumption that these are level 2 students that have some background knowledge and that they can answer and show the differences, right? But now they're doing it through a paragraph, describe the difference between assessment and evaluation, give a T-chart, demonstrate it in different ways. The fact that, and so subsequently when they go around the different groups, they realize that each group had a different task or a different expectation, I should say, under the same task. I didn't change the content. I didn't change the learning objective is still the same. My students will be able to, at the end of the session, know the difference between assessment and evaluation. But every group experienced it based on their level and had an opportunity to display their knowledge in different modalities.
Yes, you're basically you tier the levels of difficulty or challenge, if you will. So it all falls under the same. You're using the same context, the same content. I mean, using the same characters, the same everything, story, or whatever the task is, and you're just lowering the tiers depending on the proficiency level. That is essentially what differentiation is. Exactly what you. I mean, you framed that pretty well. I mean, I don't think there's a clearer way to put it. But if a teacher isn't skilled in that way, they may, like you say, just modify something or add something or omit something and think that's differentiation. But and maybe in some cases that would qualify if the differences are small. But if you have gaps, like what tends to be the case with multilingual learners, you got to tier the tasks. You do. That's really.
Or in a classroom where you have bilingual or multilingual learners with special needs, right?
Oh, yeah, that too.
You have to really craft and differentiate is second nature in what you do as educators in those type of settings.
You said it. All right, so we talked about differentiation. I think that's an ongoing conversation that needs to continue because it's a never-ending thing that people need to get better at. I think we all need to, at least I need to get better at it anyway, and I've been doing it forever. All right, so you served as a mentor to faculty, to teacher candidates, and to education leaders. What role has mentorship played in your own career, and what advice would you give new educators seeking mentors? And this is, I think, more teachers ought to have mentors, honestly.
Absolutely. Mentorship has been so influential in my professional career. I mean, I don't think that I could have had this much of a successful career in this path had it not been for having had mentors and individuals in my life that saw potential, that challenged me to do more. For instance, when I was in the P12 as a bilingual special ed teacher, I had an amazing superintendent, Dr. Betty Rosa, who currently is the chancellor of the New York State Department of Education.
Wow.
But 30 years ago, she was my superintendent in District 8 in the South Bronx. And I remember that she was very personable, the first Latina that I saw in my early career in a high level position, right? So not only did that bring that admiration, but just her ability to be personable and know everyone in the schools within the district, and identify talented teachers that were that had leadership skills, and me being one of those identified, and she recruited me to be, the professional developer at the district. And so that mentorship of saying you have what it takes, not just to teach in the classroom, but to teach your peers, and share some of that expertise and share some of that innovations that you're coming around with and bringing out. And I remember that one year, it was a summer, and I went into, here's another mentor, my school principal. It was a summer, and went into the office to make Xerox copies for a dynamic that I was going to do, training the teachers for that incoming year, the new teachers that were hired. And she was on the phone, and she says she was talking to a dean of a school of education from Mercy College, who was calling her to offer her to teach a graduate course in the fall semester. And she always had her open door policy, so she had her door open. I can see she was on the phone. I'm making my copies. And she says, "Oh, no, I can't. I am very busy. This is a very challenging year. However, if I may, I can recommend you someone to teach the course." She hangs up. She peeps out the door, and she says, "Olga, come here." I go into her office. What did I do? What's going on? What's happening?
Were you nervous at that point?
Yeah, I mean, you have your principal calling you in, you're
Like, what'd I do?
What did I do? And
Yeah.
she says, "Well, I need you to, update your resume, hand it to me, because I'm going to recommend you to teach a graduate course at Mercy College for the fall." And I looked at her wide open, like, huh? Like, I don't, she saw something in me that I had not yet seen.
Yeah.
Here I am, years later, an associate professor, teacher preparation, teaching educators for decades, right? At that time, I didn't see that. I was just happy that I can teach and share, the little activity that I had learned the year before with other colleagues. I said, "I don't know I can do that." She says, "Yes, you can. I have taught the course. I will give you the syllabus. I will give you my resources." Mentorship. Passing the baton to the next generation is so important and priceless. Investing in other members, junior members coming up the ranks, is so important. And needless to say, that started me in a different light. Once I tasted those waters of teaching in higher ed, I was like, "Oh, this is great.
This is for me. This is it.
This is for me." She's retired now, and we still keep in touch over the years. But if you were asked her, she was like, "Yeah, that was the worst idea I had, because I lost her after a couple of years. I did leave the P12 district to become an assistant professor in higher ed."
Right.
Right. Yeah, we lost her. So I don't think that was a genius idea, but it led me to this path, right? This new passion, this new challenge. And so now, at this stage of my career, I have another mentor, Dr. Nilda Soto Ruiz, who's a colleague at Touro University. And when I was hired at Touro, I was assigned to her as my mentor. I was hired as a chair, and she's an assistant dean. And, we connected. It's important that the mentorship is intentional, and that there's a connection, a relationship that is reciprocal, that, you give and take. And so her and I have done a collaborative work over the years. And like I said, her and I just recently came back from Spain, from an international conference sharing our research on preparing urban leaders in the United States, and her perspective and her background in leadership and my perspective in research and, international perspectives brought those two disciplines together. And so mentorship is very important. 2 years ago, we dove in more deeply into mentorship, and we found that there is a high need in higher ed, particularly, of mentorship, specifically mentorship of minority faculty, Latinas, African American, just minorities in general. When we make it to higher ed, we're left in this valley of loneliness where it's an elitist platform. Everybody's doing their research, everybody's doing their great things, and no one really has time to look to the side and say, how can I help you write an article? How can I help you or support you in your research ideas, right? It becomes this silo. It can be, not always, right? We do find pockets of excellence and institutions like the one that I'm working with now that are collegial, that stick together, that look out for those junior faculty and encourage them to come on board. I'm working on this. Be a co-editor, be a co-presenter so that you can get out there and get that feeling of presentation, what it's like to teach here and there. Let's work on developing curriculum together, right? So that we can learn and support one another. Mentorship is huge and it's lacking in higher ed. It's really lacking. And so there was a book chapter that we wrote regarding the research that we found of the considerations and needs of minority faculty in higher ed and the importance of mentorship.
You can make a case that it's lacking in what you call P12, K12, right? I don't mean whatever you want to call it. Mentorship is few and far in between, from at least from my perspective, where I'm coming from. There should be more of it. There really should be, and it should be authentic too. It should be genuine. It shouldn't be just for the sake of saying it. Oh yeah, we have a mentorship. No, you
and intentional, because in
that's what you meant. You said intentional, right?
Yeah, in most states, I believe I know for New York for sure, first-year teachers are required. The districts are required by the Department of Education to provide a year mentorship, right? And I remember my first year in teaching in the middle school and having this mentor assigned to me. He was a retired principal, older gentleman, from a pool of mentors that they were serving as mentors. There were no prior meeting, greeting. There was no connection, right? I think that most valuable, the relationship of the higher ed teacher preparation and the K-12 world should be more consistent, right? We send our teachers to do their student teaching in these schools, and then once they finish their program, they're gone, right? There's no more following up, but yet they're requiring them to have a year mentorship. Why not extend that field supervisor that has been working with them throughout their student teaching, that has a relationship with that candidate? Why not that person be the first year mentor and extend that experience? I think it would hold more value than just at random assigning someone else to the candidate. There would be some continuity there.
If I feel that if it's really that important, they'll find a way to do it. It can't just always be like, oh, we gotta find money to pay people. There's got to be another way to do it. Other
Absolutely.
Than money, But anyway, that's well said. Now I want to get to our last question, Dr. Diaz, because you've shared so much, and I feel like, man, we've covered a lot of space here, a lot of ground. But if you could change one thing about how we prepare teachers to work with multilingual learners over the next 10 years, I know that's a lot to ask, with AI and all these other things coming into the mix. What would it be? What would that look like? How would you prepare teachers to work with multilingual learners going forward?
I would like to, although during my tenure as New York State TESOL president and being engaged in the field over the years, I've seen more acceptance of multilingualism, and I see more developing of dual language programs, and I'm seeing more. But what I would like to see more is more integration of discipline. I think that the responsibility of teaching language and English multilingual language learners should not be just of the bilingual and TESOL people. I think that teaching students with special needs should not be the responsibility of just the special education experts. It should be all hands on deck. It should be everyone. I think that our teacher preparation programs, we are mandated by the state to incorporate a course on teaching English language learners for the Gen Ed certifications. That's not enough. I think that it's unavoidable. Gen Ed teachers, you're going to go into a classroom with kids who are diverse, diverse language learners, diverse abilities, right? And so whether you set yourself up to be an ENL teacher or ESL teacher or not, it's unavoidable. And so I think that reconsidering our curriculums in teacher preparation and making it more inclusive, culturally responsive, that's authentic, not just an isolated course, but that it's weaved into the development of pedagogy, so that when the candidates go out there, whether they have the certification or not, that they have the knowledge, that they have the discipline, the understanding of at least a more than just basic understanding of how to teach multilingual and diverse students.
So you have a very positive outlook then going forward, right?
Yes, okay. I want to make the world a happy place where everyone learns and have wonderful experiences, and there's no negative things going on.
No. So, I know there's a lot, because there's a lot of scared people out there with AI, Dr. Diaz,
Yes.
There's a lot of scared people out there. And I was on a different show earlier, and we were talking about just AI stuff. And I think they're asking me like, well, what do you think? And so I'm just saying, well, it's a tool. You got to use it.
It's a tool.
The tool doesn't replace the mechanic, though, right?
That's correct. It's fear of the unknown, like everything else, right? We were afraid of cell phones when they first came out. We were afraid of Zoom because we thought that they were seeing beyond what they needed. There were so many things but it's fear of the unknown. Once we were exposed to it and we had an personable experience with it, we get past those fears, and then we learn its functionality. We learn how to use it as a tool. Right now, there's a big roar in higher ed with AI and students plagiarizing and cheating and not having.
Big time.
But I said, if we give them the tool and hold them accountable to how and what's acceptable in using the tool. I mean, we have superintendents that are allowing their teachers to use AI to improve their lesson plans. I think that's great. If it helps and supports and supplements the learning experience, why not? In higher ed, in our courses, we're instead of we can't stop it. It's here and it's here to stay. So we either join what's that expression? If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah, you have to embrace it.
With responsibility, educate them on what's the ethics of using it and how to use it to support and facilitate the growth of education.
Right. It's it goes down to you can't have AI replace critical thinking. And if the more you rely on AI to do the thinking for you, when you're faced with a real situation, you're not going to be able to think your way out of it. You just won't be able to. So use it as a tool, but make sure it's just that and not replace your own thinking and your own thought. So
absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Dr. Olga Diaz, everyone. Dr. Diaz, thank you so much for joining us. You shared a lot, and I'm very humbled by your time, and I'm very grateful that you're able to come on this program and share your thoughts. What's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, continue the good work that I've been doing through my research and my teaching. I am soon to be a first-time grandmother this upcoming August, so I'm preparing myself emotionally and mentally and in every way.
Ooh, that must be exciting.
To embrace that stage in my life. So there's a lot of great things coming my way. I look forward to continuing to engage in the world of higher ed and just continue to be an advocate. I'm a strong advocate. I donate a lot of my time pro bono to supporting quality and quality education for our English language learning communities. So that's
wonderful.
basically what's in my in my cards in my future.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And congrats on the grandchild. I'm
Thank
not
you.
there yet. I've been nudging my son. I'm like, come on, man. I'm ready to be a granddad. Come on. So we'll see what happens there. So congratulations to you. Thank you so much for being on the program, Dr. Diaz.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.